Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Entrusted. I'm Susan Yurkowitz. If you've been here before, welcome back. We're so glad that you're with us. And if you've never been with us here, what an honor it is that you would spend your time with us this evening. And what a night you've chosen. I'm so excited. I can barely stand it because of our guest. We have such a treat for you. She is a British born, internationally known storyteller. Who doesn't love a good story, right? Just let's get ready, get cozied up. This is Geraldine Buckley, who will be joining us, and she became a naturalized American citizen in 2007. What I love is that she has a habit of stumbling into inadvertent adventures, which I'm sure are part of the stories that she will be sharing. She's definitely had some interesting jobs. And just to name a few, she was a restaurant critic in the south coast of Spain. She was a television news anchor, and she was a Protestant chaplain in the largest men's prison in Maryland. I can't wait to hear about that. She tells stories at major festivals in universities and schools, colleges, prisons, hospitals, in people's living rooms across America and beyond, and as far away as New Zealand. Did I tell you or did I tell you? So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Geraldine Buckley. Welcome, Geraldine.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's lovely to be here. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. That was lovely.
Oh, well, you embody every bit of it. So I met Geraldine. For those of you that don't know, I'm a veteran and I took a class with ASAP, and Geraldine was a professor or a teacher teaching us how to tell stories. And I fell in love with Geraldine. I fell in love with her stories. I fell in love with so much about her, and I'm still learning more. So I'll be learning along with everybody else tonight. So I'm curious, though, if you would please, I mean, because I took that course, I know a little bit about storytelling, but I think there's many in our audience, other than just hearing maybe a teacher or a parent share a story with them, might not know about the storytelling community. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that, please?
No, I don't mind at all. I stumbled into it, it must be said. And so many people don't know that there is a professional storytelling community. So even if you're a really, really big name, and there's some major names in the storytelling community, it keeps you incredibly humble because no one's ever heard of them. So, so it does keep you very humble. And some of them are very big. Like one of the big festivals in Timpanogos in Utah, the last night they have 4,000 people at the Jumbotron, and your face is up there at the Jumbotron. So of course, you leave there thinking you're frightfully important, and then you get back home and realize you're absolutely not at all. But I believe you wanted me to tell you a story so that people know what I do. So,
Please.
so I always, so at the moment I go, as you said, I go all over the country, and I tell stories, and I teach people how to tell stories in corporations and festivals. But I also go into 3 Inova hospitals in Northern Virginia, and I tell stories to the cancer infusion patients while they're having their infusions. And I always start by telling them that this is my little blurb. I say, my stories are all true. Some people think they're not, but they are true. And I got married for the first time 3.5 years ago, first time. Don't have children, so I've had lots of time to get into trouble. and then I usually start with this story. So I was terrified, absolutely terrified. The kind of terror that grabs you by the throat, moves upwards till you can hardly speak. Let me explain. It was the late 70s. I was 18, standing by the side of a road in Canada, a long way from home in England. I was wearing a blue circular uncrushable skirt and holding a sign that said, "The border." I was about to put my thumb out and hitchhike for the very first time, and that's why I was so terrified. Now, you might be asking, how did I get myself in that predicament? I blame the whole thing on my mother. You see, my mother had a great love of adventure, but when she was 14 and growing up in Liverpool, the Second World War broke out, and England stayed at war until she was 20. So she said her best adventuring years were swallowed up by bombs and fear and rationing. So she was determined to relive them now vicariously through me. So while other mothers were urging their only daughters to read, to study, to go to college, my mother was saying to me, "Geraldine, for goodness sake, you study far too hard, put away those books and go out and party." It's absolutely true. In fact, I'm the only person I know who got a master's degree out of sheer rebellion. So when I was 18, I told her I was going to go to the Olympic Games in Montreal with my boyfriend. And we were going to hitchhike from Montreal to New York and then fly back home to England from there. Well, on that occasion, I wanted my mother to be like other mothers. I wanted her to forbid me to go so I wouldn't have to, and I could tell her she'd ruin my life. But this was my mother. She said, darling, let me help you pack. So that's how I found myself standing by the side of a road in Canada with my thumb out and my knees shaking. But at least I had my boyfriend standing next to me. He'll keep me safe, I thought. My boyfriend, Ivor, was very respectable. He was 5 years older than me. He traveled extensively, so he explained the rules of the road. Geraldine, he said, you always wear good clothes. That way you have a better class of ride. You always you never get in a vehicle where you're outnumbered. And when you're in that vehicle, you always chat to the driver to build up a rapport. And if you do those things, you're less likely to be murdered. Murdered? I have a vivid imagination. I could just imagine my mutilated, murdered body being tossed out of a car on the outskirts of some exotic American city like Akron. I prayed, Lord, please watch over me. And then I wanted to thank every car that whizzed past. But finally, an ancient two-door, rusted-out old Chevy skidded to a halt. Now, I could see through the open passenger window that the driver was alone, which was good. But he had long, unkempt hair, a missing front tooth, and dirt etched in the deep lines of his face. And he said, I can take you 40 miles. And Ivor said, thank you, sir, and got in the back seat with the backpacks and whispered to me, you get in the front. You're good at talking. Build a rapport. So despite my misgivings, I had to get in. I reached for the seatbelt. It wasn't there. Oh, it's no use going for that. So the man that dropped off months ago. And he started that car. Well, it looked like a rusted out old jalopy, but he had something powerful under that hood because we went from 0 to 80 in seconds. And the man only had one hand on the wheel because with the other, he was chain smoking. And he was lighting the new cigarette with the burning butt of the old one. And he didn't have an ashtray. He didn't actually need an ashtray because right in front of the gear stick, there was a rusted out hole that went down to the road. And that's where he was flicking his ash and the still burning butts of the cigarettes while I was focused on that hole. I was waiting for a spark to hit the engine and the whole car to explode. And I was just thinking, it's all right for my mother, wanting me to have adventures, but I bet she's at home in England right now in a comfy chair, having a cup of tea. Oh, for a comfy chair and a cup of tea. I had no idea there could be so many ways to be killed hitchhiking. And then the man said to me, I've got a glass eye. Would you like to see it? And he took out his eye and he put it on my shoulder, perched like a parrot. I froze. I didn't want that eye going into my lap or down by my feet. I didn't want the man grabbing for it, particularly not as we were going so fast. And then I slowly turned my head. And I wasn't sure what to say. I mean, what is the protocol when you're eyeball to eyeball with an eyeball? So I turned my head a bit further to see what Ivor's reaction was. His eyes were closed. He wasn't in the death seat. He was taking a nap. I finally managed, that's fascinating. And that seemed to placate the man because he didn't say anything else until he dropped us off about 10 minutes later. But I was very relieved that from that point onwards, he kept both eyes on the road, even though they were 3 feet apart. I was so glad to get out of that car. I watched it disappear till it was just a speck in the distance. But all that time, I felt that glass eye now back in the man's head, staring at me through the rearview mirror. But then I remembered something my mother told me while she was helping me pack. She said, darling, she said, don't worry, I've prayed. So everywhere you go on this trip, you'll be safe because the Lord, he'll keep his eye on you.
Literally, I had to put on my mute. Awesome. And that is a true story.
It's completely true story. And I tell you, so I go into these 3 hospitals and I get an awful lot of stories back about glass eyes. Amazing how many people know people know, people with glass eyes. So I had this lovely old boy, well into his 80s. This is one of the patients. And he said, I've been married for decades, he said. But when I was a young man, before I was married, he said, I had a friend who had a glass eye. And on a Friday and Saturday, we'd go into bars and see if we could pick up any nice young ladies. He said, and if my friend with the glass eye saw a nice lady sitting by herself at the end of the bar, he'd take out his eye, roll it along the bar and say, I've got my eye on you.
Come on.
And it's amazing how many men think that's a good idea.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to know. So well, first, were you always very good at storytelling? I mean, was this just a natural thing for you? Is that what prompted you to get into storytelling?
I have enough Irish in me to get an Irish passport. And so I think it's in the blood, in a way, to be able to. I mean, I've been up on a stage doing various things, not storytelling, but I did a lot of poetry. And then when I was older, I did slam poetry, which is performance poetry. And in fact, I did a tape. This was because it was so long ago, even before CDs, called Out of the Slammer, which was about, I mean, way before it had anything to do with the prison, which was slam poetry and prayers. And so I originally went into the prison teaching storytelling and slam poetry, and the guys were fantastic at slam. It was amazing. At the time, I did In Your Face Jesus poems, and used to go into really, really secular places and win with these In Your Face Jesus poems. And I remember one time, I do think the Lord trains you for the things you're going to be doing in the future. So one time I was in London in a sleazy bar doing one of these In Your Face Jesus poems, right? And so I'm walking out, there's this big guy by the bar. He's clearly a bikie. He's got leathers on, he's got chains, he's got a really tough look in his face. And he said that poem, he said, that really got to me. He said, will you pray for me? And I just stood there by the bar, by all the liquor, and prayed for that guy. And I think it was a training for my big bad boys in the prison.
That's incredible.
So
So would you mind sharing your path? Like, what led you to sharing this talent that you do have for storytelling and kind of brought you to where you are today?
well, my classic line is when people say, how did you get into storytelling? I say, well, it was after I left prison.
Oh.
So,
keep them on their toes.
So I had done, so in one story I tell, I said I actually went into the prison originally to teach storytelling. I didn't. I went actually to teach slam poetry and creativity. But anyway, when I came out, I was exhausted. It was a fabulous job. I was meant to do it. But it was exhausting and working. No one should ever, I don't think, work in a prison unless you know you are called to do so, and for the amount of time that you are called. The moment the anointing lifts, you should get out, basically, because they're very dark places. So anyway, I was exhausted, and I knew that I'd been that exhausted one time before, and so I knew that I didn't have it in me to do a big job. I was going to have to take a recovery period, but I lived by myself. I had a mortgage. So I said, Lord, you got me into this mess. You got me into the prison. I need money to keep on going. It's over to you, over to you. I don't know what the next step is, but I'm trusting you. And so whenever I drove into the prison, I would be listening to NPR, and about 8 times on the radio, I heard about slam storytelling. And because I was so exhausted, it took about 8 times for me to think, oh, I used to do slam poetry competition. I thought, oh, I think that's the Lord talking to me. The moment I clicked, I've never heard slam stories on NPR at all. So slams, it's a competition. So I got online and I lived in Frederick, Maryland. So that's on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. It's the Washington, D.C. metro area. So I Googled slam stories, and the closest one was in Philadelphia, which was 2.5 hours away. I would have gone, but I knew I wasn't going to go regularly. So I ended up finding a storytelling place in DC, and you were meant to have gone once before you told a story there, but I kind of fudged it. And actually there were two big snowstorms back to back, and so people were not noticing this. Anyway, I ended up, so they booked me to go. The theme was things that happen at night, and it was a very secular place. I knew it was a very secular place, so I thought, great, everyone's going to be doing sex stories, and I'm going to do about the first time I went into the prison. So I did it, and people loved it, and that's, so I said to the Lord, okay, Lord, this is what I want to do. I want to write and I want to tell stories, and I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm just, I need money, so I'm just leaving it up to you. So the next time I told a story there was it was the 11th of May. In fact, it was 16 years ago. I remember it was the 11th of May because the Lord always gives me a present for my birthday. My birthday is the 9th of May. So it might be a wonderful sunset, a gorgeous flower. One time it was a trip to New Zealand, seriously. Wow. I know, wow. I know. I serve a God who thinks big. Anyway, so I was booked to tell another story, and I met this person outside, and basically, to cut a long story short, she started chatting, discovered I was going to be telling a story that night. She really liked the story. I was on the end of the first half. And as I say, everyone, basically it was the Lord showing off. Either everyone wanted to go to the bar, or they all wanted to go to the restroom at the same time, or I got a standing ovation. I mean, one of those three. So seriously, it was the Lord. And then she came up to me and she said, look, that was amazing. You could tell it on any national stage except for Timbernogus. I didn't know what she was talking about. I had no idea. She said, I am doing a workshop in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Now, Jonesboro, Tennessee, I had actually heard of it, but it's known as the storytelling center of the world. I mean, basically, it's a small town. It's the oldest town in Tennessee. At the first weekend of October, it is transformed. They put tents up, these huge tents all over the place, and people flood in, and they have 15 or so of the best storytellers in the country, and they have some from the world. And when you tell at Jonesboro, if you tell on their main stage, you become a national teller. You go from being either a local or a regional to a featured teller. It's a major deal. Anyway, she was doing a workshop in Jonesboro. She said, I'm doing it with 2 other tellers. I want you to come. So I went. I mean, there's more to the story, but I went. And in fact, one of the storytellers there is very well known. His name is Bill Lepp. And he gave me a quote that is on the back. I have 3 award-winning CDs. I have the same quote on the back of each of them. I know CDs. I know it's so old. But anyway, so if people can't play them now, I just give them to them and say, look, use them as a coaster. It's a drinks coaster. But anyway, so I have the same quote, which is, Geraldine's is from Bill Lepp. Geraldine's humor is 100% natural, the polar opposite of a hair color. So basically, they really, I went to this workshop, and then things kind of just took off. And I just had a little bit of money because my father had died. I had a tiny, tiny bit of money. And I said, okay, you need to trick your brain. Often we need to trick our brains. We have an edit brain. So I thought, all right, why don't you do an MA in storytelling? Now, you can do a master's degree in storytelling. I already had a master's degree, and I knew that the master's degree in storytelling was wonderful, but it was very academic. So I thought, I'm going to do my own. I'm going to put it together because I needed to trick my brain to not be afraid of spending money. So I went to all these different workshops. I found out about the different streams of storytelling. It meant that I could travel, and things just opened up. However, it must be said that when I was in the prison, so there was an amazing church behind the walls, a 600-man church behind. It was started by the previous chaplain. It was one of those places that when they had services, at times there was so much anointing in that place, you honestly thought the roof was going to blow off the chapel. It was wow. The most unbelievable place at times, incredible. And it even had a seminary all paid for by outside funds. I mean, it was the most extraordinary place. So I have just gone off on a rabbit trail because I was thinking about the incredible church, and I can't think what I was just telling you. What was I telling you?
Oh, about... Well, you had been talking about your master's degree. You wanted to put it together.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. So in fact, I used to go off on rabbit trails in the prison, and the lovely inmates would say to me, "This is where you were, chaplain." Oh.
Well, I follow because my brain is the same. So,
So, yes. So, what happened was the inmate leader of the church came into my office one time, and of course, I had come in doing all this creative stuff. And even when I was the chaplain, I carried on doing a creative workshop every week. He sat down, made him a cup of tea. I was allowed to take it a kettle. That's a whole other story. I have a story called Tea in the Slammer. But anyway, he said, chaplain, he said, now the men had prayed me in. There was, because otherwise, and why on earth would I be the chaplain? That's a whole other story. But he said, chaplain, he said, you are a really good chaplain, but I know that's not what your main focus is. He said, no, I'm not saying you're not good. You're really good. He said, but we prayed you in. The men prayed you in, and we believe that when you leave, the Lord's going to open incredible doors for you in an area that really is your passion. And that's what happened. That's what happened, because suddenly
wonderful.
I got into storytelling, and then the doors just opened. Like that story I just told you at the beginning. It was there are these slam competitions, and Jonesboro had their first one in 2010, and I won it. So in the audience, which was incredible. So I was new. Was it 2010? Was it? No, it was 2011 was the first one. 2011.
But you won.
But I won it. And I'd only just started. I started in 2010 doing this whole storytelling thing. So I won it in 2011. Whatever, I won it. There was a lady in the audience from New Zealand, and she put together festivals. And so she invited me to New Zealand with another major big name storyteller. So I went with him and his wife, and ended up telling stories in the most incredible places in New Zealand, including in prisons. So I went into the largest men's prison in New Zealand. And the men thanked me for teaching them storytelling by doing a haka. I don't know if you know a haka. It's an incredible Maori dance, this war dance. And what it was they were basically saying, you have given us your art form. Let us give you our art form.
That's so beautiful.
It was very powerful. Anyway, so as we all know, if you kind of hitch your wagon to the Lord's star, you never know what is going to happen.
That's amazing. So you mentioned you were brought in initially to teach workshops on creativity in the prison. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So was there pushback? I mean, that's not the most, when I hear prison, that's not naturally what comes to my mind. First would be, oh, they will be able to have creative workshops, but I love that. Did you find that to be cathartic for them, or were they resistant at first?
What they would say is, when they were in those workshops, they were not in prison anymore, because that's that's what creativity does. It just opens your mind, opens your spirit. It was that they were not in prison, and it was incredible what they came out with. I mean, it really was.
Imagine.
And so the amazing amount of creativity that is behind the bars, and it's just channeled in the wrong way. I mean, if they had had a chance, because so many of them go from terrible schools, they're channeled straight into prisons. If they had a chance to use their creativity in other ways, it would be a completely different story in their life.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking too, because just because they're in prison does not negate that God has given each of them a talent. And as He is the great creator, that He's given each of them some form of creativity. I'm sure it looked different for each of them from inmate to inmate. I'm sure that you must have seen some things that you were blown away by.
I've got stories, but now just exactly in line with what you're talking about. They in one of the big prisons in California, and I wish I could actually remember which one it is, but it's the major, very difficult prison. Anyway, they had this they brought in creativity, and what they discovered is that when inmates did creativity, that the prison violence dropped incredibly, and the recidivism dropped incredibly. And even if men were in there for life, it strengthened their spirits to enable them to help other people and be very productive behind the bars. They actually stopped that whole program, because I'm afraid it was because of the this is all documented, because of the guards, the the prison officers, their unions, because as there was less violence, there was less need for officers. And so they voted in a very powerful union, and they voted in politicians who would be very tough on crime and basically said, lock them up, throw away the key. But there's one famous, his name is Jack, I have to think of his last name, but he was a prison chaplain. And so another prison chaplain, I read this in his book, and I'm now Facebook friends with him, even though I can't remember his last name. So another prison warden was talking to him about a really difficult inmate, and what this guy who had brought in creativity, well, when he was the head of the prison, he said, put a paintbrush in the man's hand, because he knows that changes everything.
That's
the incredible power of creativity. Incredible power of creativity.
And storytelling. So you said you taught them storytelling as well?
Yes. So I taught them poetry, and then I taught them storytelling as well. And in fact, then I got them to create a show. Of course, we're talking about storytelling. I'm talking about something different now, so I'm sorry. But this was 3 months. We had 3 months. They gave me 12 Christian guys. So I did a whole series of workshops for 200 men. So they did drawing. They wrote. They would then get up on the stage and share. It was very powerful. So then they said, you can have 3 months. You can have 12 guys, and so I convinced them to do this, to come up with a production at the end of it that the guys wrote. So you can imagine how much prayer went into this. I mean, my whole house was rocking, and the guys came up with 7 words, and they came up by themselves through prayer and through meditation and various things, which was despair. The despair you feel when you first go into a prison. Time, when you realize how much time you've got ahead of you. Acceptance, when you accept it. Power, when God's power breaks into your life. Joy, when his joy just seems to flood you when you get to really know him. And freedom, when you realize you can be free anywhere as long as you're moving, you have the Lord's freedom. And so it turned out that so I had 12 guys, none of them could sing, which I found amazing. Now, I can't sing, but I was amazed that out of 12 guys, they couldn't. Only one could play a musical instrument, but a few of them thought they could dance. I have a friend who's a professional choreographer, a wonderful Christian lady, choreographer in Canada, and a dancer. She flew down on her own dime, taught the men moves. She first of all prayed over them by dancing over them, which was unbelievably powerful.
Wow.
And then taught the men moves, and so we were doing this production in an amphitheater. Everything in the prison is falling to pieces, but it was had 2 aisles down it, and I knew that they were going to walk in, go to the front, and start this production. What I didn't know was what they'd arranged themselves. Because I would have never suggested it. They came in down the 2 aisles with a hand on front of the guy in front, shuffling as though they were a chain gang. And they came in and they were going free, and they were going despair, despair, despair. And it was so moving. All the hairs on the back of my neck were standing on edge. And then they went through all of these. And then right at the end, the guy who could play the bongo drums, he started pounding them with a calypso sound. They threw their arms in the air and they yelled, freedom, freedom. They started dancing out, yelling freedom. And they were on the front of the paper the next day. The only time that any of them had been in the paper for anything good, captured with their arms. You could hear them yelling, almost like that anointing was just going out over everyone who was watching, who was reading the paper. Incredibly powerful. As we both know, all forms of creativity are so amazingly powerful. Those men were transformed. They were transformed. So I have to go back to
hair standing up on the back of my neck. That's so
to go back to storytelling. I do have a whole story about that. Of course, the trouble is I'm a storyteller. You touch me, you get a story. Yep. So.
Well, I love it. I love it. So interestingly, you started with a comedic story, and I was wondering if you feel the need. I think you may have answered that, though, because there's all different genres of storytelling then. If there while you were in prison and they were telling their stories, obviously you're going to get some pretty heavy stories, but do you find that that was um, a release for them to be able to tell, and was that difficult at first to be vulnerable enough in that situation to share their story?
Um, I always aim to create a safe space where people can share their stories. But however, with storytelling, what I teach, and I think that was one of the things in your class, was that you have to tell. It's a classic line: you have to tell from the scars, not from the wounds. So you have to deal with the emotion. So if you've had something really hard happen, you've had a divorce, you've had a child die, you've had something that is really deep, it can be very helpful to share it, but you have to have done the grief work first. Because if you haven't, if someone hasn't done the grief work and they're standing on the stage and they're telling the story, subconsciously you know that they're in trouble, and you hear them. I mean, and you know, this is, I've been listened to so many stories. Even I get embarrassed. I want to get under the seat and pretend I'm not there. I'm sure you've been in situations like that when you're thinking, I just hope it stop. I want them to stop. And that's because they haven't done the emotional grief work. But if you do the emotional grief work, okay, so otherwise, if you cry on the stage, people will be embarrassed. If you have done the grief work, the deep grief work, people subconsciously know that you are safe. They might not even know it in their mind. They know it in their spirit, and they will feel, then they will cry. They will cry.
Interesting.
Which is very cathartic. Of course, if you're telling that deep kind of story, it's really important to have some laughter in there, because it gives people a chance to breathe. And you almost do have a contract with the storytelling audience, which is why it's so different from theatre. And that you are bound to take them into a safe place. So you take them on a journey and leave them in a safe place, even if there's been many traumatic things along the way. And you need to have hope in there, and you need to have laughter, places where people can laugh, just so they can breathe, so that they can get back to the story again.
Oh, so because they were really entering into that person's story. I've heard it said before that we are hardwired for story. I'm sure you know much more about that than I do. I mean, people just lean in when I'm sure when you begin to share a story.
There's a longing in people to be seen and to be heard. It is an absolute inner longing. And the thing is, with I mean, we're on social media now, but you think you've connected with people, but you really haven't until you connect with them in a completely different way. And it still leaves that longing to be heard and to be seen. So when I started this all those years ago, 16 years ago, whatever, and I went to the storytelling club in DC, I was amazed that on a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, there were 300 young professional people packed into that place.
Oh my word.
Place. I mean, so I went back month after month. I can be very slow at times. In fact, I went back about 6 months before I realized it was a gay nightclub.
That's why they were there, though, was for story.
No, they weren't. No, once they finished the storytelling, then they opened it up. But the whole place was, and I didn't realize. I mean, they were very handsome barkeepers, you know.
And that's the story was born.
Some lovely posters on the wall admiring the flexed muscles. But no, I didn't realize, and I'm usually not that slow. So it was a great place. But yes, over 300 people packed into. People have a longing to hear stories, and so storytelling is spreading throughout America in a whole new way. So a true stories told live. So there are places like The Moth. The Moth is a club that started in New York and now is all over the country. So go to themoth.org and go
the Moth. MOTH.
Yes, like the insect. Themoth.org.
Okay.
And if you go into their videos, you can see a lot of stories. Now, that some of them are going to be naughty, with naughty words, just to let you know, which they aren't at the festivals, but they are on. And then there's one in DC that is storydistrict.org, and you can go into their videos as well. But wherever people are in the country, I mean, just Google where is storytelling, because because there is storytelling all over the country, and there are festivals all over the country. So in the festivals, there are some true stories, but I mean, they have folk tales as well. They have different genres of stories. But in places like the Moth and This American Life, that's another one. They tell fabulous stories, and they are true stories. People desperately want to connect with other people in a real way. So it's a big thing in America at the moment.
Well, I imagine that it's would be something to be at one of those festivals. I've never been. I'm excited to look into that. But just to broaden your understanding of the human experience, I've often thought that would be a really cool idea. Is even in our town where I'm from in Erie, Pennsylvania, we have one of the largest populations of immigrants, and it hit me that because I was born and raised in the area, my experience of this town would be completely different from somebody else's experience of this town. And what a way to connect, to share our understanding of that town, because it would give us insight into each other as well. That was an aside, but I just always thought.
No, you've really hit on. You really have. What I remember saying to the inmates right at the beginning is, with stories, that we were so different. I mean, I stood up on the stage the first time and I said, I'm here to teach you performance poetry. In the story, I actually say I'm here to teach you storytelling because it fits in better. But whatever. I said, you might be wondering how I could teach you anything because we're so different. For a start, I'm a woman, you're men, you're here in this maximum security prison. This is the first time I've ever been in a prison. And then I have this accent. I was born and brought up in England. I went to an English convent boarding school. Yes, we are so different. But that's the incredible power of story and creativity, because through it, you can, particularly with story, you can take someone by the hand, you take them to places that otherwise they wouldn't be able to go. And so then I encourage people to when they tell their stories, to make images that are incredibly vivid, because the thing about storytelling is when it's done well, it's several things are going on. The storyteller is making it vivid. They're painting. It's not just painting a picture. They're making a film, a video go in your head. You can almost see what they're, and then you can put your experiences through that. So sometimes the most extraordinary things go on. You might even be taken out of the story, but you are reliving something that you needed to relive that was maybe too painful to do it without this comforting story. Also, the other thing, just in line with what you're saying, is I've heard many stories where the person is an incredibly good storyteller, and you're seeing things from their perspective. There's a fabulous, fabulous storyteller called Reverend Robert Jones, who is just wonderful. This African-American, he is a pastor, but he plays fabulous guitar. He tells stories. And one of the last stories I heard him tell it a couple of times in different places because we've been booked together, but telling about his grandfather almost being lynched. And sitting on his porch waiting for the Ku Klux Klan to come, and then the person who stopped them was the guy that he worked for. He just stepped out and said, "Sorry, you're just not going to do anything to my best worker." But the way he tells it, you are seeing it through his eyes. You are experiencing it through his eyes. So rather than being told how frightening it was, you are experiencing through his eyes. And I've heard immigrants tell those stories of what it was like and what it is like. So you understand, because it's like you're inside them. You're seeing it, if they do it well, through their eyes. You're feeling it. They're taking you by the hand and taking you to places that otherwise you wouldn't be able to go.
That's amazing. All right, you've mentioned a bit about your relationship with God. I love how you share that you just converse with him. You've got a feeling, you bring it out to him. You were talking about, and he converses with you. I'm wondering, does he ever prompt you which direction to go when you're going to share stories with different audiences? Are you ever like, do you ever have a story in your mind, but then you just maybe sense from him, no, Geraldine, share this one? Does that ever happen?
Yes, that has happened. And sometimes I question it. There was one I was just thinking about the other day. It was a few years ago. It came up in Facebook, which is why I just remembered it. You get all the. So it was 7 years ago. I was in Portland, and I was telling stories, and I thought, I'm meant to tell stories about nuns. Why? in Portland, Oregon. I went to a convent boarding school. I have this whole long story called Nuns I Have Known. And, and
A convent boarding school. That's what you're saying.
convent,
A convent.
convent.
Wow.
Went to
Wow.
mass.
Wow.
I went to mass every day. Yes.
Mm.
And I became a Protestant minister. You know this. But anyway, so I was telling these stories, thinking, why in Portland? Why am I? And these two women came up to me afterwards and they said, "Thank you so much. We are nuns." And
Oh,
what's more, they had a friend of theirs who'd been a nun who was a nun at the same small convent boarding school that I had been to. I'd mentioned Paul's Convent, FCJ, which is the Order of Nuns, the Faithful Companions of Jesus. And I'd been there. There was only 120 girls in the school. Their friend who was the nun came after me. So and then there's other times I'm thinking, you're really meant to tell a prison story. And I've told it, maybe in a school. And I suddenly see these looks on kids' faces, and I know they have somebody in their family who's incarcerated, and they're going, "Thank you." You can see them, that because the story I tell is about honor behind the bars, and so that they almost letting their breath out. In fact, one child kid. In fact, this was a long time ago. It was an 8th grade boy. And I'd been in the school for 4 days. I was doing a workshop. So at the beginning, this kid, he was a big kid for his age, and he was very enthusiastic. And he would come in going, "Hello, hello." And then I told this story about the prison, and he just got really, really quiet. And then I asked for questions, and he slowly put his hand up and he said, "Is everyone who's behind the bars a bad person?" And I just told him absolutely not, and that some are, but most have just done something stupid, and they just want to get this over with. And that just because you might have done one thing doesn't mean to say that if you've punched someone, it doesn't mean to say you're a thief. You might be the most honorable person out who would never touch anything. And you could see this burden lifting off him. And then he addressed the class. So he was clearly one of the most favorite boys in the class, but he'd come from Texas, and he was outgoing, and this was a public school, but it was near Annapolis, so it had a lot of lawyers' kids, and I mean, even though it was a public school. And so he addressed this class, and he said that he loved his brother, absolutely loved his brother, looked up to his brother. Brother was so marvelous, but then his brother got into trouble and went to prison. And so then he thought that his whole life was wrecked, that this idol that he had was just dreadful, until he heard this story and realized that his brother was so honorable. So, I mean, it's incredible. It's amazing. You just don't know. Basically, with all of us, no matter what we're doing, we're just obedient, and then just hope that we're actually right in the center of God's will. It must be said that every time I get on a stage, especially if I'm feeling really nervous, my prayer is, "Lord, it says in your word, I will not be put to shame." And I'm counting on it. I'm counting on it right now. I'm counting on it right now.
Holding you to your word. That's
Yes.
awesome. Oh, that's incredible. So you shared a story with me right before we got on. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing. You mentioned, so you started out in the convent boarding school. You became a Protestant chaplain. You shared a little bit about your mother and the hitchhiking story, but you shared with me too that she had a prayer that she prayed for you, and how much your life has kind of come full circle.
So there's a little bit. I was wondering, should I share this? But anyway, so my mother was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, marvelous sense of humor, Irish Catholic, strong Irish Catholic, and I was going to get ordained. I knew, you can imagine how upset my Catholic mother was going to be. I thought, Geraldine, no matter what you say to her, this was a bit I didn't tell you. No matter what I say to her, she's going to get upset. So just tell her. So I said, "Mother," I said, "I'm going to get ordained, so you'll have to call me Father." I won't repeat what she said to me, but she set a priest on me. He arrived, cassock quivering. He said, "Geraldine, why have you given up the faith?" I said, "Father," I said, "I love the Catholic faith," which I genuinely did and genuinely still do. I said, "But the only thing is, Father, you see, I'm called to preach, and I can't afford the sex change." So, So anyway, my mother who died 27 years ago, until she died, every week she would phone me up and say, Geraldine, I have just dedicated my communion this week and prayed that you will marry a Catholic in a Catholic church. I said, Mother, forget it. It is not going to happen. It is not happening. I'm a Protestant minister. Who did I marry and where? I ended up marrying a Catholic in a Catholic church. Yeah. Yeah. Walking down the aisle, I could almost hear my mother going, told you, told you.
Oh, I'm sure. That's beautiful, though. That's a
Uh,
beautiful story. I
so yeah,
love that.
my as I told you, my husband really is very Catholic. He has a PhD in philosophy and taught at Catholic University.
So,
But he loves the Lord with all his heart, and
oh, yes.
which is, as of course, many Catholics do, as many Protestants do. That's the most important thing: is having a revelation, having had a revelation that Jesus is who he said he is, and just basking in his love. That changes everything.
And don't you find God's timing incredible? I mean, you married later in life, you'd shared, and just I've thought about this for myself as well too. Just the stories that have made us who we are, the experiences that we've had, and what we bring into that marriage. I'm curious what your husband is. He's supportive of your storytelling career. Was this something that was
Yes.
completely different than anything he had been seeing on his horizon when he met you?
Well, what we met on Catholic Match.
Oh,
So
did you?
yeah,
Okay.
on Catholic Match. Now, I wasn't actually, of course, the only thing is, all of these, touch me, you get a story. But I wasn't actually signed up because I'd been signed up for 2 years, hadn't met anyone. But I played this wonderful word game, met people through the word game, came to my senses. I thought, Geraldine, you're paying too much money for a word game. But on Catholic Match, they keep, if you don't pay, they, so I just didn't re-up. They keep up your picture and your profile. You can like people, but you can't write to them. If they write to you, it's one of the few that you can read their letters after 10 days. If you want to respond, you have to pay. Fair enough.
Okay.
So at the time, I was, of course, during the pandemic, no audiences. I went back and got my professional chaplain qualifications. As I like to say, that I was a prison chaplain, but excuse the pun, the bar is very low to be a anyway, so I was a resident chaplain at Frederick Health Hospital in Maryland, and then I was a hospice chaplain. So my favorite patient had died. That's the only thing about being a hospice, everyone dies. So I lived by myself, pandemic. So I had a meal and I had a glass of wine. I thought, I think I'll look at the eye candy. So I got on, and I saw this very cute guy, very cute. And I saw that, he had this PhD and then he'd gone to Harvard Law School. But then it said that his favorite genre was science fiction, my least favorite genre. And it said for 30 years, he had headed up a Dungeons and Dragons group. All I could think was, get behind me, Satan. But he said he absolutely loves stories, and he wanted someone who also loved stories. I knew he meant written stories. So right from the off, it was fine. Anyway, I thought, darling, ignore it. I was about to do my first live storytelling festival in 2 years. So I'd done lots of funerals where everyone was live except one. But when I got off to do this big storytelling festival, and so I had to really concentrate. Came back, he'd written me 2 letters. The second one presumed I wasn't interested because I hadn't responded to the first. He said, but I'm really interested in storytelling and I would really like you to tell me more about it. So of course I was going to deign to give my great knowledge, because the last night at that festival, there's 4,000 people and a Jumbotron and your face is on the Jumbotron. So you come back with your head out like this. But I was a hospice chaplain. I had to shrink my head to go back to listen to one person's story. So anyway, I meet with him. The first time we actually meet in person, he takes me out for a lovely lunch. And I said, and we talked for hours. I'm a restaurateur's daughter. It was like, we have to get out of here because they need this table for. So I said, would you like to come back for coffee? He doesn't drink coffee. He said, but I'd love to carry on the conversation. We get back to my place and he settles in. And then he says, what older single women dread to be asked, why have you not married? So I thought, he says he likes stories. So I said, Let me tell you a story. Now, this is a long story. Let me shrink it. Basically, I was in my 20s. I was in Texas. I worked for Lady Bird Johnson's radio station. I got in the shower. I'm ruining the story. In the shower, I'm short-sighted, but I'd been doing all these metaphysical stuff and believed I could talk to animals. It was the 80s. I was crazy. What can I say? I was between Catholicism and New Age, whatever. Anyway, thank you, Lord, that you jerked me back. But anyway, so I'm washing my hair, bend down to get the conditioner, which is in a small squat bottle, and it moved. I thought, this is what I've been learning about. You know, the metaphysics, the atoms have clearly moved. I got closer and it moved again. I thought, fascinating. Got even closer, realized I was nose to nose with a huge bullfrog, Texas bullfrog. Anyway, it's too long to tell the story, but I end up talking to the frog, trying to get it into a net. It wouldn't go, of course. Ended up picking it up in a towel, throwing it down the hillside. Good riddance, Mr. Frog. Get into work. I talked to the receptionist who got me into all these classes. I said, you know those classes about the metaphysics and talking to animals? She said, yes. I said, well, they don't work. Told her about the frog. She said, oh, you should have kissed it. You should have kissed it. I thought, kiss a frog, don't be stupid. She said, oh, I'm channeling something. She said, oh, Geraldine, I strongly believe that was the king of the frogs and that you have brought down a curse on yourself of singleness. So I said, oh, poppycock, don't be stupid. Went back to work, couldn't stop thinking about it. Went back that night, thought, you're British, you could just apologize to the frog. The frog wasn't there. I got down the hillside, wasn't there. So got back up. And so as I said to the handsome man in my living room, I said, no, I was not stupid enough then or now to think that really that was the king of the frogs. And I had called down a curse of singleness, which is what she said. She said, you've called down a curse of singleness in yourself. I said, I do not believe that is the case. I said, but all I can say is that was 40 years ago and I've been single ever since. And this lovely man in my living room went, oh, I see, and changed the subject. I thought,
no.
Yes. 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 It was wonderful. It was lovely. No wonder I married the chap. No wonder.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, so much for science fiction. You can have it science fiction.
So in fact, after we'd started dating, I said to him, you know, I think I'm going to be too much. I think we should forget this, because I said, I've traveled so much. I mean, I'm English. I was brought up in England. My parents moved to Spain when I was 11. I've lived in different countries and traveled a lot. And he was born near Washington, D.C. I said, and although you've traveled extensively throughout America, you've only been out of the country twice. I said, I think I would be too much for you. He said, oh, no. No, he said, remember, I write science fiction. He said, I've traveled to several planets. I've been good friends with an alien. I don't think you'd be too much for me at all.
What a perfect answer.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
Oh,
yeah.
That's wonderful.
So you asked if he's worried about me telling stories. No, he was warned when he went to the first big festival with me, the National Storytelling Festival, when I was a feature teller. They said, does he realize that he is going to be Mr. Geraldine? He was fine with it, because then I go to his big events where he is honored and I am the wife, and I'm quite happy to be the wife. After all these years, I'm ecstatic to be the wife, actually.
Oh, so, I love that. Supportive of each other.
Yeah.
So you are very, very clearly a gifted, and by that I mean, like, God has given you many, many gifts to enable you to be able to tell these fantastic stories. Do you feel that people need, how do I word this, need to have that gift in order to share stories? Because there's all different kinds of stories. I'm just thinking of the people that are out there that are listening to you, thinking of the stories maybe that they could share, you know, but maybe don't have, you seem very extroverted. I don't know whether you are or not, but, you know, I guess I would ask, like, what are the talents that you feel help someone to be a good storyteller?
So interesting. And first of all, I know I come across as extrovert. I'm really not. In fact, an awful lot of storytellers are introverts. Okay. Now, I'm not an introvert, but they really are introverts. They're just not when they get on the stage. So years ago, I told you that I put myself on my own master's degree and I did all these different workshops. There is an amazing Texas storyteller called Elizabeth Ellis. She's like a doyen of the storytelling community. She's much older now. She's deliciously round with this long, long white hair, and she is wonderfully eccentric and a fabulous storyteller. And so I went to her several times to her workshops, and then also you can pay storytellers to teach you how to tell stories and to help shape your stories, which I did for several of my stories. Anyway, so I was doing that. I treated myself. I remember it was a birthday many years ago. Treated myself to a time with Elizabeth, and I asked exactly that question about who makes the best storyteller. She said there's two different kinds of people. She said there are the people who are naturally talented. They are naturally talented storytellers. There are the people who really work. They learn their craft, because there is a craft. Anyone can tell a story, and I encourage people to do that. Sit on your porch, tell the family stories, tell your stories. But if you actually want to craft a story so that basically you can get paid, or to really craft a story so you could tell it many, many times. And one of the best storytellers says you have to tell a story at least 100 times. You polish it like a jewel. That's Donald Davis, who is the most wonderful storyteller. Well, what she said was, she said there are people who are naturally talented. There are people who really work hard. They learn how to craft a story. They learn their craft. They really learn how to put the pauses in, how to paint the pictures. How they really learn. They say, she says, and often, amazingly, it is those people who rise through the ranks quicker than the people who are naturally talented, because often the people who are naturally talented don't think they have to do the hard work, because they know that they can control an audience. But you can maybe do that once or twice, whatever, but the other people are really learning their craft, and they polish their craft. She said the best is when the two come together, when someone who is really talented really learns. And I'm just going to just tell you what she said, which was blow my own horn. She said, "You've got both," to me, which was that was my birthday present that year from the Lord, just to hear that from this wonderful storyteller. I mean, it was just such a compliment. But I've never forgotten that. I've never forgotten that. So it doesn't matter. You might not be the kind of person who comes across as extrovert and can, but you can learn how to tell stories. You can really learn how to tell really good stories. And the thing is, there's a difference between an anecdote and a story. So a lot of the stories that we tell are anecdotes. It's just a matter of them being able to shape that into a story. And that is hard work. You discovered that with the 6-week course that you did. I mean, it takes a lot to shape a story. And natural talent is wonderful, but you need the hard work. If you've got both, that's fabulous. But you don't always. As I say, the people with talent often don't put in the hard work, and the other people rise to the top.
Oh, that's great insight. So this brings us to our final question. I'm thinking about the people that would maybe they know they have these stories that could be beneficial to others, or they just really either have a great sense of humor or have had these experiences in their life, but they're letting fear hold them back. Do you have words of encouragement, maybe ways that they could get started, or just get over that hurdle of fear, so that they would begin to share their stories?
I think you'll be surprised how many professional storytellers actually can get stage fright. And so there are tricks around it. So there was there was a point. Well, sometimes I'll be sitting next to someone. I'm about to go and do an hour's storytelling show, and I'm thinking, I don't know my name. Never mind a story. I mean, I don't know any stories. I'll turn to the person next to me and say, "You go and do it." And they're going, "Oh!" I mean, of course I'm good. I'm fine once I get on the stage. Just know with stories, know your beginning, know the end, and the rest will come. The rest will come, and it doesn't matter if you mess. And also, it's practice, 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 and then more practice. But know your beginning, know your end. As I often say, it's like crossing a river and on stepping stones. And you want the scenes of your story, and you need to know those scenes really well. You need to know the beginning, know the end, and then each scene gets you across. you've got to remember, when you get in an audience, when you get in front of an audience, they want you to succeed. They do want you to succeed. And nobody knows your story. So if you mess up, just keep on going. But just know that there's an awful lot of people. One of the best storytellers I know gets stage fright. I mean, she's fine when she starts, but she gets stage fright. There are tricks around it. One of the things I used to do was I would have a sheet, and this friend of mine looked at me and I said, "Oh, this is way too junior for you." She said, "No, it's not." I mean, she was years ahead of me. So I had the name of the story in black and the amount of time it usually took to tell. And then in red underneath it, I would have the first line. Okay. So in each set, that's what I would do. I mean, for the whole festival, I would have that would, so that if I'm thinking, I can't remember what I'm doing, I've got the first line in front of me. So there's all sorts of tricks that you can do, but just don't let fear hold you back. Just don't. Just know that. Just know that you'll work on your story. Know that you've done as much as you can. Practice with the dogs, with your teddy bears, with the kids, whatever. Just practice, and then know that other people are scared. And then, as I said, my prayer always is, Lord, it says in your word, I will not be put to shame. I'm counting on you. I'm counting on you. And then just get up there and do it.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Geraldine. This has just been an honor to have you on Entrusted. It's it's so good to hear your stories. It's so good to know that you're out there sharing joy and sharing hope with others through your story. I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful that you came on this show and that you spent some of your time with us tonight.
I've had
Thank you for being here.
And just one other thing, if you go on Geraldine, if you put in Geraldine Buckley Storyteller on YouTube, a whole load of stories pop up. So
wonderful.
And
so that's how people can, yes, that's how people can.
And they're all through. And GeraldineBuckley.com is my website. I'm afraid a rather out of date website, but yes, but it's got all my contact details in there, my email and all that stuff.
That's great. So if people do want to reach out to you, you're open to that. You'd love to hear from people. Absolutely. Wonderful.
And then book me, darlings, book me. It's been delightful, and you are absolutely wonderful, and you are a fabulous storyteller. You really are. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you again to Geraldine for being here. And thank you to each of you for sharing this time with us. This has just been a wonderful hour with you. And I would ask, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Please share with others so that we can get the momentum building and we can share more stories of those that are using their talents to bring good into the world. Thank you again for being with us.